It looks like we are. Okay, awesome. Well, today I'm super excited because I am joined by the lovely Grace Nixon Peterson. She is the co-owner of Tiny Snail, which is the most beautiful stationery company. Their tagline is "There's magic in the mail," and that's exactly what they do. Is they create magic and send it in the mail. And Grace also has a really beautiful an interesting background story. So I'm so excited to have you here, Grace. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a huge honor to be able to be here, and especially after listening to your interview with Leah, it's like, oh, I'm so excited to follow that. It's really fun.
Well, both of you were on my list of my desired podcast guests because I have been following you now on Instagram for, I mean, it's been years that I've been following you, and since 2018 following you like really, really closely. So even though I wasn't there, I feel like I've kind of been part of your family journey. But before we dive into all of that, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a South Dakota girl. I was born and raised in the Black Hills. I went to Santa Clara University out in California for college. Met my husband while studying abroad. We traveled on semester at sea, and we call it the Love Boat because we fell in love sailing around the world.
I love that.
And it was amazing. And then, yeah, it was kind of like the Bachelor study abroad version, you know.
So there were
So it
other
was
there
fun.
were other
And then
couplings too.
I went to New Orleans. I mean, there were a few. Oh, let's say my internet connection is unstable. Hopefully, it'll stop that. Um, there were a few. I mean, we got pretty lucky. The ratio actually, I think, was like 70% female to 30% male. So I think a lot of girls are pretty jealous of me that I snagged Bobby.
Well,
Or
yeah,
he
with that
snagged me.
ratio.
But yeah, we got lucky. And then yeah, I knew that was my senior year, and I knew while I was on the ship that I would be headed to New Orleans to do Teach for America, which is how we connected.
Yes.
And yeah, and then I taught in New Orleans for 5 years. I taught first grade, and during
I
that
didn't realize you taught for 5 years.
yeah, it was like a big chunk of my early adulthood. So
Hmm.
kind of amazing to think about.
Yeah. I mean, and that whole experience was pretty incredible. So just to give you guys who are listening a little bit of background, that is how Grace and I met. We met at Teach for America. And I don't know, where did you do your training? Phoenix too?
Phoenix.
I mean, did we know each other in
But there were
Phoenix?
so many of us.
There were so many of us, and then there were
No.
so many of us in New Orleans too. And I remember seeing you in passing a lot, but I don't know that we ever had any like deep conversations, which now looking back I'm like I regret that so much because I just love your heart and everything that you put out. So I feel like we would have been friends, but
Oh, I feel the same way about you. I know that if there was a time machine, we
I
could.
know, I know. And I feel like every time I did see you though, you were really bubbly and really passionate about teaching. And that was refreshing. That was really refreshing because that was a tough time. Um, Especially in the beginning. I know for me, my now husband Sam had just deployed, and I was commuting an hour each way to the school that I was teaching at, and it was just like a pretty big wake up call going from college straight into like a very serious job.
Very serious. And no, it's just relentless.
It is,
Yeah,
that's the perfect word for it, is relentless. It was completely relentless.
yeah. I learned a lot in those 5 years. I mean, I got so lucky with the school that hired me.
Mm.
The Healy Academy. It was just really incredible with like the support and resources that they gave me. So
Oh,
I feel like that is partly why I was able to be bubbly. Is like I felt,
yeah.
even though it was so hard some days, I knew that I was so supported and had resources. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Unfortunately, my experience was like the opposite. Our principal didn't want Teach for America teachers in the school.
Ooh.
So basically, like everywhere I went, she was like watching me like a hawk. So it was
Oh
it was
my
kind of a
gosh.
scary
That
experience.
sounds terrible.
I would be teaching at the chalkboard and I would look up and she was staring at me through the window in the door, like making sure that I wasn't messing anything up. It was so bizarre. It was so bizarre. So it was just a really tough experience. And I taught special education too. And she didn't even want the support teachers coming into the classroom from outside the school to help with the special needs kids because she didn't want them to know that we didn't have the right number, like the right ratio of special education kids in our classroom because we were an inclusion classroom. So
Mhm.
it was like I had to fight for everything for those kids. It was even
Yeah.
like rubber bands because I remember having a special needs child who he had autism and he wanted something tactile to keep his attention and she didn't even want to let him use any of these I forget what they're called now, it's been so long, but basically like props and assisted things to help him like stay on task. So it was that was a really really difficult experience for me.
I can see why. Yeah, to not only have like Sam deployed and then have that as your work environment, that'd be really
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah, it was, but at the same time, I'm grateful for it because I feel like I learned so much. And those kids were, even though, we dealt with a lot of behavioral issues and there were a lot of fights, even at like 6 and 7 years old, um, those kids are imprinted on my heart forever.
Me too.
Just,
I have like
oh,
a portal that Leah and I do our business meetings on every
yeah.
day. And so all these photos like cycle through from Facebook and Instagram. And
Oh,
so my kids will just pop up and it's just like, oh my gosh, there's Jadlyn, like there's William, there's Asia. Like,
so
oh,
cute.
I just love seeing their faces.
Oh, yeah, I miss those. I do miss that a lot. I miss that connection with those kiddos who just lit up my day for sure. Okay, so can you tell us a little bit? I'm going to turn the corner here to now something a little bit more serious, but can you tell us a little bit about how life has been since 2018? Because you've been on a roller coaster.
Yeah. A big roller
I
coaster
know.
that
I feel like
none of us seem
yeah, that doesn't describe it at all, even.
Yeah. Yeah. So it started in August of 2018 when I got the worst call of my life um, from my mom. And she said that Leah had been in this massive accident at work at Habitat for Humanity, and they knew very little, but she was in the ER, and that was it. Like they had so little
I
information.
can't even imagine getting a call like that.
It was just like the bottom just drops out from under you. And so I just wept for like hours on and off, just imagining her there and just knowing she was on that surgery table. And Lee and I just have such an intense connection that
Yeah.
I've never felt pain like that before.
Yeah.
I think
She
I've
talked
always
about that
envisioned.
connection. She talked about that connection in our episode too, because I interviewed Leah a couple of episodes back. So please listen to that if you haven't. But
Oh, I have.
I
It made me
mean,
cry.
oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean you. I meant,
Oh, to the audience. Oh,
yeah, the audience. Yeah, I know you have. But she
yeah,
referenced it
audience.
multiple times in the podcast episode about how you guys are so connected. So, I mean, I can imagine just a sisterly bond is, that's a really special bond to begin with. But you guys are like best friends and business partners on top of the sisterly bond.
Yeah, yeah. It. it's so hard to describe, what it felt like to just know that she was fighting for her life. And um, it's really interesting because because that night I was in Milwaukee. I live in Milwaukee now with my husband. And so she was in South Dakota. I was in Milwaukee. That night, like my dad was scrambling to help get me a plane ticket to go the next day to be with them in South Dakota. But there was obviously like this huge stretch of hours where I'm packing to get ready to go, just worried sick, and
Oh.
just like
It
in,
probably felt like 3 weeks.
yeah, it did. And I can remember like going to bed that night. Um, and again, like I knew that she was in surgery, and poetry just, it means so much to me. And I actually have a few poems that maybe I'll share during this.
Yeah. Oh, I would love that.
Yeah, but so the poem that just kept on coming to me was E. E. Cummings, I Carry Your Heart.
Mm.
And so I just said, like, I just whispered that into the dark and
Oh.
just directed it straight to her, like envisioning her on that table. And that became my prayer for the next
Oh.
30 days that she was in the ICU. I would just say that every single night. And actually, when I arrived home to South Dakota the following day, and then went to my bedroom that I had grown up in, but my parents had completely switched it into a guest room and put up different art that wasn't there when I was a teenager and all these things. Next to the bed was a watercolor that Leah had done, and it was the quote from that poem.
Oh my.
I carry your hurt, I carry my heart.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, so that became my prayer, and it still is.
And I think one of the things that I found so profound as an observer of that was that you, from the beginning, were so vulnerable on Instagram, asking people to pray, but also talking about what you were going through. I mean, I remember multiple times watching you cry in your Instagram stories, and I would end up just bawling my eyes out because this, I mean, I cannot imagine the magnitude of surprise of all this happening, but then the trauma and then the unknown at the end of like, is she going to be okay? Because it was touch and go there for a while, right?
For weeks, honestly. It was just surgery after surgery, and then she would start to seem like okay as you can be, and then it would take a dive again. And I mean, one of the ICU doctors said, the best advice I'm going to give you, like people say, take it day by day or take it hour by hour. And he's like, you can't do that or you will run yourself into the ground. He's like,
Oh.
you have to take it week by week. Like take the benchmark on Sunday, how's she doing? And then you have to just wait out the full week and like, is she better 7 days from now? And hopefully that'll be a steady progression. But he's like, I'm just warning you, it is not, it doesn't just progressively get better and easier, sadly. And he was so right. It was just one thing after another. And then, some days would be fine. We prayed for boring days in the ICU. These are the best kind of day. But yeah, even like, I want to say 2.5 or 3 weeks in to Leah being in the ICU, and she had kind of moved from the most critical area of the ICU to a still intense, but it's kind of like you had graduated to a little bit better of a spot. So we were in there and felt like things were really progressing. And then she had this angel nurse, Pamela, who was like new to us, and she came in the room and just beautiful. Like we just connected with her so well from the get-go. And she was like, I'm going to try to work my schedule out so that I can give Leah her full bath today, which usually like a tech would do that. Mm-hmm. But she's like, I really want to be the person to do this just to get to know her. And like, she had so many wounds and wounds are really dangerous in the ICU. Like they get infected. And I mean, that's part of the reason why her right
Yeah, can you give us a little rundown about, just for people who haven't listened to the episode with Leah, what
Yeah.
exactly happened? So she was working Habitat for Humanity, a giant crane,
Telehandler.
thank you, a telehandler, like 25,000 pound telehandler, fell on her and crushed her leg, and obviously knocked her out. And so,
Yep.
can you go over some of those injuries there that you're referring to, and how she had all these open wounds, and they were probably opening over and over again from all of these surgeries?
Yeah. Yep. She was crushed under this telehandler for over 30 minutes while they tried to extricate her. And she had basically all of her blood replaced, I think twice throughout that process. Um, they were finally able to, pull her out from this machine and get her to the hospital, but her spinal cord was severed during the accident, and so she became paralyzed from the armpits down. And the first question that she asked us in the ICU, she was intubated at the time, so she couldn't speak, but she would swell into our hands. And so she started swelling into my hand, and she asked, "Can I still draw?" And we said, "Yeah, you can." And Leah is just, she's such a gifted artist. And she has been ever since she's been little. And so,
And so
and
are
that's
you,
one
my
thing.
friend. So are you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. When I had heard from my mom the afternoon of the accident, that was one thing that I can remember just like sitting on the couch and just being held by my husband. And I just like cried over and over again. I just said, like, "God, you have to let her live, and you have to let her still use her hands." Um, and she can. And it's just, so much has been lost and so much still remains. And
Oh, it puts things
yeah,
into perspective, doesn't it?
yeah, it really does. And she's, as you know from talking with her and watching her journey on Instagram, she's just a one in a billion soul.
Yes, she is. Because I mean, when she was talking about her accident, she kind of glossed over like some of the really like major parts. And then she was so adorable, but she said something like, "Well, yeah, I lost my legs and I'm paralyzed from the armpits down, but I still have my brain and I still have my hands." And it was like so matter of fact. And I know it can't always be like that, but I mean, her spirit is like unbreakable. But I see that in you too. And so my hunch is that you have a pretty strong family unit, and she touched on that as well. So I interrupted you when you were saying this angel of a nurse is taking care of her in the bathtub, making sure that all of her wounds are being delicately washed because they're fresh.
And this was
Up there.
already after, like, she had already had her right leg amputated. She had been through multiple surgeries. And so, and it was kind of like one of those normal, boring days in the ICU. And I think we were like watching Queer Eye on Netflix together, just having our dance parties. And then Pamela's like giving Leah a bath and washing super carefully along her wound on her back. And she was like, this doesn't feel right to me. Like, there's something going on here. I'm getting a doctor. And the wheels start turning. Doctors come in, look at it. Like within 2 hours, she's in the surgery room again because they had found that this massive infection was like bubbling along her spine, and they needed to wash it out and clear it. And they read you the risks every time that
Oh,
it goes into surgery, and every time there's a risk of death. Like, there's anesthesia that happens. It's, even if it's just, more of a normal procedure, even if it's not like an amputation or something, like there is this risk of death. And And that just kind of broke me.
Oh,
Like Leah was wheeled off. And yeah, I just remember like standing in this room, and I think it was me and my mom and her best friend and this nurse, Pamela, and we just all like went into this circle and just hugged each other and cried. Um, and this nurse prayed with us and prayed over us, and prayed over Leah, and it was such a I won't even say like that was like the pinnacle of everything, because it wasn't. But that was just one of them, and it just burns into memory as wow, that was really hard and really painful.
Well, and you realize too, or I realized too, that especially after following you and seeing all of these, like, not every single moment, but a lot of those moments on Instagram, because I feel like you were so vulnerable. But I realized that Leah had a lot of the physical trauma, but you had so much emotional trauma happening throughout all of that, over and over and over. It wasn't like one surgery done. It was touch and go, like you mentioned, for so long. And so Leah, after how long was she in the hospital? It was months, right?
6 months altogether. I mean, it was basically a month in the ICU and then an additional 6 months of rehab.
And you were there for so much of it too.
Yeah, I felt really privileged to be able to do that. And I mean, my husband's so incredible. He's a golf pro, and summer is just insane for him. So for him to just be like, go, 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 and I'll be fine. And just nothing but support. And yeah,
Bobby.
I know, he's so good.
That's so awesome. That's so awesome. So I'm just going to go over the chronology as I know it a little bit. So Leah gets out of the hospital. She gets back home, is as comfortable as she can be. She gets married, which is so cool. And then you're hit with more news that is not of the welcoming type, not news that you want to hear. And can you touch on that a little bit? Because I have some questions that I want to ask you after you tell all the listeners.
Yep. So then I got the second worst phone call of my life. So bad news always comes in phone calls from my mom. And so in October of last year, I got
just slightly a year after Leah's accident.
Yeah, we had celebrated. I had flown back to South Dakota for the 1-year anniversary of Leah's accident. We called it Leah Lived Day. And we launched this incredible card collection and celebration called the Keep Dancing Collection. It was the perfect day celebrating that. And she treated us all to a fancy dinner. She's like, I am treating everyone who is part of my team. And so we went out and we had champagne and amazing food. And it was the best day. We had a dance party in the park, like me and our little brother and Leah and our dog. So we had celebrated that, and I was just like back in Milwaukee gearing up for a nice fall. And then in October, got a call from my mom again, and she said, honey, I have some bad news. Dad spent the night in the hospital, and we don't know what's going on yet, but they've taken him in for scans and they found 2 tumors. And that's, of course, never what you want to hear.
No.
But it's, just especially after
so much trauma.
Yeah. You feel like you've kind of made it through and like gained your balance again. And, cosmically, it's just like, well, no, everybody should just be allotted like one major suffering.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking. like, wait, no, shouldn't this be spread out a little bit? Their family has gone through too much already.
Someone on Instagram at one point was just like, I just want to be able to start a Kickstarter for pain where we can all just sign up to have a small percentage of Leah's pain. And I was like, that is an amazing invention. Like, somebody do that.
Oh, if only we could. So your dad spends the night in the hospital. You get this call from your mom. And then what was the diagnosis? And I mean, I know you talked about it on Instagram, but for all the people who are listening.
So we didn't know for a little while. He had to go out to Mayo Clinic, which we're so grateful that he was able to go there. But so I took the train out to Rochester once again, leaving Bobby, and he was just like, go be with your dad and your mom. So biopsies were done, and it turned out that he actually had not just one type of cancer, but two. And they were both incredibly rare. So he had central nervous system lymphoma in his brain, and then leiomyosarcoma in his abdomen, which so the two aren't even connected at all, which is
so bizarre,
insane. Yeah, and both incredibly rare, and so. And dad is just the healthiest guy. I think he's run 24 marathons in his life. He's constantly gardening. He,
active dude, active. Yeah.
So active, so zen, like meditates. He's just amazing. So it was just very disconcerting to see him degrade so quickly physically. Like he just, within the span of a week, he went from, it took a little longer than that. I think my mom and he started seeing signs along the way, but within the span of 7 days, it was drastic. It's like he went from walking on his own to barely being able to walk with a walker and stumbling. And it was just really concerning. So here's a poem that I have to share about it. And it kind of is with, both like what we went through with Leah and then having to also go through this with dad. And I wrote this pretty recently, actually, just after Easter. But it's called, Can You Be There for It? Can you be there when the Friday crashes in, when the smog tries to choke you, when part of your heart lies on the surgical table and you sit with breath held on the hospital sofa waiting for the surgeon's update? Can you be there when the confident stride crumbles to a shuffle, when nightly trips to the bathroom bring alarm, when he stands and you hear the crash, thank God for false alarms? Can you be there when the biopsy comes back with worse news than you can bear? Can you be there for the long, long wait? Because this winding, painful prelude all leads to resurrection story, the one where you dance with that same heart that once lay on the surgical table, her eyes alive in spite of the tingling pain, the one where you call him in the midst of another treatment, "Happy Easter, Dad," and you talk for 27 minutes of gardening and snow on roofs, of gerrymandering and Lake Michigan, before he goes to walk the halls for an hour, speeding past nurses with his IV pole in hand, doing push-ups and squats. You will be given no guarantees, but you do have this moment. Bear witness to the miracles. Let them hover on your breath. Let them carry you another day.
Oh my gosh, Grace Mary Oliver. That is so beautiful. And just your tenderness. And I feel like you are not afraid to feel all the feelings.
If there's one thing that I've learned through this, it's that that's the way through.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is the way through. It's like, I've never given birth, but I know that if you don't breathe, it's not going to help you.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that we are just such giant vessels capable of holding all of these emotions at one time sometimes. And
Yeah.
if you can just sit with it, that's what's going to save you.
Oh, I feel like that's such solid advice. Um, and how is your dad doing today?
He's going in for another treatment tomorrow, actually.
Okay.
And so, um, both the brain tumor and so the brain tumor, he's gone through chemo for it, and right now it's gone, which is miraculously
Oh, that's
beautiful.
amazing.
Yeah, he went from basically losing like so much function in his right hand and his whole right side to trying to play classical guitar again and
Oh,
doing piano lessons again. Like, so that's been beautiful. And then they were able to do surgery on his abdomen, and it was a huge surgery, but they feel like they were able to remove it. And so they'll keep on monitoring, obviously, but for lymphoma, it's the type of cancer that it just comes back if you don't consistently keep on treating it. And so, I mean, he was going to get stem cell therapy, which is the
okay.
kind of the best outcome usually. And then the pandemic hit.
Oh,
And so it's just not the ideal time because you basically wipe out your entire immune system.
yeah, and you have to be so, so, so careful.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, so he has 11 more rounds of chemo for sure. And then they'll evaluate after that what to do.
Hmm. You have been through so much. But if I have noticed anything in your family, it's that each and every one of you has this like incredibly courageous heart and fighter spirit. And where do you think that comes from?
Mom and dad get a ton of credit. They're just really incredible people. And so
Oh,
I feel like when people say to me, like, this is so inspiring, or the way you're handling this, or this is so courageous, it's a lot of that is just pure gift from
mm,
the container that I was shaped in, and that's mom and dad, and their incredible witness to hope and to acceptance and to faith and just this belief that there's something bigger going on here. And
yeah.
like my mom, I always grew up with her saying, you know, her favorite Bible verse is all things work to the good. And
Mm,
so I try to cling to that. Like we can't see everything that
yeah.
is going on. There's so much mystery, and there is a lot that I can't figure out. And like we were saying before, like the distribution of suffering, and I
Oh,
think of our suffering as a family compared to so many families around the world who are enduring persecution and just, you know, you name it. Like
yeah,
there is just,
yeah.
I mean, we have easy street compared to so many people, and at some point you just have to give in to the great mystery and say,
Yeah.
this is where I am. This is what I've been given, and I'm gonna just do my best to bear witness to it.
Well, you've just, I mean, just like your namesake, you have handled it with such grace from my perspective. I mean, I remember watching you and Leah dance in the hospital room and having these dance parties to lift your spirits. And it was like everybody joined in, like your mom joined in, the nurses joined in, and then it became this very contagious like dance party. I mean, I would watch these Instagram stories and be like dancing on the other end because it was so cool to see the joy out of the pain and the suffering. And I think for me, in watching that, the juxtaposition or the dichotomy or whatever it is that you want to say, it was like this deep deep, dark suffering and tragedy. And then, because it was so deep and dark, the illumination of the joy was so vivid. And to share that with everybody, like you guys did, was such a gift.
Yeah, those days, I mean, I would spend most of the night with Leah in the hospital. And then I would like switch shifts with my dad around 4 in the morning, and I would go home and sleep, and then he would be with her in the early morning, and then I would sleep. But then I remember like every morning just waking up almost, it just felt like champagne bubbles in my stomach, just knowing that I got to go back and see her, and um, and that she was still with us. And I'm 34 years old. I don't have that sense of like Christmas morning excitement. Usually, you know, I'm like, I am delighted by life. I think life is so magical and I find a lot of joy in it. But I think it's rare that we capture that like giddiness of being around someone or getting the chance, you know, and it's just like a situation like that, where life is just hanging by a thread, and it's just like, okay, but she's still here today.
But she's
like,
still, yeah.
I get to go be with her. And when she was in rehab, I remember Leah invited me to one of her therapy sessions, with her psychologist, and that's what I reflected on. I was just like, I never want to forget what that feels like. The trauma of being so close to losing her, because it so illuminates what we've been given, this chance. And when you think of it, that's how it is with everyone. But we don't often reflect on that. You know, you kind of take things for granted, and that life will be linear, and that
yeah, and it never is.
it never is. And I don't want to forget that it's just a huge pure gift that any of us are here.
It is. And I feel like, you know, this is a generalization, but normally when people are faced with that kind of trauma and grief, you go one of two directions. You know, you go down a dark path where you feel like now your life is completely off course, or you go down the path that you did, which you just feel grateful for like every little piece of it. And that experience of watching you guys go through this over all of those months was such an inspiring thing for me. And I continue to like tell people about your story. I don't know if you know that, like tell people about your story today, because I'm so inspired by it. And it reminded me of the preciousness of life. So thank you for giving that gift.
Oh, thank you for saying that. Yeah. I feel like I just almost feel like a responsibility to share stories. And I think like storytelling is kind of woven into me, and
you're really good at it.
Oh,
and your poetry is so beautiful.
Thank you. I feel like Leah's accident cracked me open with the poetry. It's become such an outlet, and just a form of prayer. Dance and poetry, honestly, I think I'm like, those are the things that are just touchstones for really getting at something deeper. And that's really been heightened ever since Leah's accident and Dad's diagnosis.
Yeah, I can see why. I feel like somebody was asking me the other day about creativity and like where I find inspiration and how did I know I was creative, and, you know, those kinds of questions. And I think for me, there is nothing like heartbreak to crack you open. Like it's an opportunity where you either make those walls thicker and higher, or you crack them down more and you go, what is the stuff of life and how can I invite it in? And the next question that I want to ask you is about caretaking, because you, for a long time now, have been such an integral part of supporting your family through these incredibly tumultuous experiences. So, how have you taken care of yourself during that time? And for those people who are listening who are maybe caretakers, what advice do you have for them?
Sleep. Like,
No.
try to sleep as much as you can. I think that's so important. I have another poem. I'd love to
Share it,
share
please. Yes.
about it. um, so this is titled Copperfield.
Mm.
1. None of us chose this. These aching nights, these fragile bodies, these windy hurricane days, this twisted worry, they just came to us. Tragedy made its visit and then visited again. He didn't even ask if we'd open the door. He came uninvited. And I realized that choice and control are like rabbits pulled from hats. They're the woman sawed in half and put back together. They're the flower pulled from thin air behind the ear. Illusion. It's all illusion. 2. Dissolve Epsom salt and slip your sweet body into the bath. Cross the bridge to pay each other visits. Islands of grief merging until loneliness subsides. Write a letter. Laugh with your brother. Paint a wall. Read a book. Give a gift. Feel the sobs expand your ribs. Breathe. 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 The real magic lies in the response.
Mm.
So I feel like that
Just keep bawling through your poems. It's going to take me a second to recover.
oh yeah, I usually I have to like practice. I mean, I haven't really shared a lot of these, but I practice a few times, but I think that that's what I've learned. Like, you just have to be gentle with your tender heart, and
Yeah.
you get as much sleep as you can, and you drink your emergency and your airborne, and feed your body good food, and surround yourself with good people.
Mhm.
I try to be really careful with what my soul brings in these days, and my
Mhm.
brain.
Yes, yes. Isn't that one of the coolest things about getting older? You realize, like, I don't really care about being cool anymore. I want to feel good.
Yes, so much better than like having watched the latest show. I mean, I still watch my shows, but
Of course, but it's different. You realize, like, well, for me, I think about it. I go, how did I feel after I watched that, or after I listened to that, or after I engaged with that person? Do I feel better, or do I feel worse? And I don't mean that to sound like a selfish thing, but it's a protective thing. I want to protect my energy. I'm such a highly sensitive person, and I'm an empath, which I wouldn't be surprised if you are too. And I think one of our major jobs in life is to protect our energy, because we love so hard and we want to give so much, but we can't do that if we're not replenishing.
yeah, I mean, that actually brought up something else for me with in terms of just like boundaries that I had to start
Ooh.
learning and drawing. I mean, when Leah, during that first week of Leah being in the ICU, it was just such a whirlwind, and I I almost did become like the point person
Yeah.
for communicating to the world about
Yeah.
what was happening and updates, and of course, like, Leah is so dear to so many people, and our family is just really woven into the whole community in Rapid City. And so a lot of people wanted to know what was going on, and at first I just like took that on, and and I'm so comfortable sharing on Instagram, like that's just what I do, and I feel really, I think both Leah and I feel so connected to lots of people on Instagram and we've never met them, but like they truly do feel like friends. And so
Mm.
at first that was feeling really good. And then it just got to a point where it's just like, I can't, like, I'm literally, there's just this tidal wave of DMs and people asking, and how did that surgery go? And is she going in for surgery? And what's happening with this? And then the newspaper would start quoting from one of my Instagrams, and I'm like, whoa,
Whoa.
just
Yeah.
stuff like that. And so I kind of had to take a step back and just say, like, my primary focus is Leah and my family. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that is, and I only have so much energy to give, and that's where I need to be. And that was like a really big turning point, I think, for me, and just realizing like there's only so much of me, and that's actually when I started sharing more poetry. I was like, I'm just telling everyone right now, like, I love you, and I know that you love Leah. And right now, like, my focus is her, and I'll probably share with you in kind of poetic ways. And I can't give like hour by hour type medical updates.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people were so understanding of that and so gracious. But it really took me like drawing that line and making sure that everybody knew
Mm.
what I could do in those moments. And I think ever since then, I don't know, I've become like much more lax about responding to texts and emails and DMs.
Well, I mean, none of it, like, when somebody's life is in the balance, none of that stuff really matters, And I feel like, and I wish it wasn't this way. This is one of those things that, like, cosmically I don't understand, but trauma is an amazing teacher. If we allow it, it teaches us so much about ourselves, and so much about the world around us and what's important. And I wish for me it didn't come through trauma, but it did. And the upside of that is that I feel like my attachments are just so different than they used to be. My focus is so different than it used to be. And what I do on a daily basis is different too. And I think I take a lot better care of myself as well. So I guess that's one of the silver linings of experiencing such hard circumstances.
Yeah. And it's going to happen to everyone. Like, not to be this
Yeah.
voice of doom, but I think in an odd way it's comforting to know,
Hmm.
just like, you're not doing it wrong. It's not,
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
there is nothing you can do that is going to like help your life avoid all of the asteroids. Like, at some point they will come, and all you can do is like be ready to ride the wave when it comes, and just like, and sit with it and wrestle with it and
Hmm.
dance through it. Like, that's what you get to choose, but you don't get to choose
You don't get to
out
avoid
of the
it all.
suffering.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think that's so profound. I what you said about like, it's not your fault, you're not doing it wrong, because my tendency, if anything bad happens, I'm like, it must be my fault, I must have done something wrong. And I think for me that comes from a lot of like from religious programming, and that shame of like, if you sin, then it could be this that happens. And not all faith is like that, certainly. But growing up in that kind of paradigm, it's been hard to undo some of those thoughts of like, this is my fault, when really life. My sophomore English teacher said to our class, he said, if you remember nothing else, remember this: life is not fair. And I was like, why is he telling us that? I'm like 15 or 16 years old, and whatever. And sure enough, Mr. Gamal, I will never forget him. Life is not fair, but that doesn't mean that life isn't beautiful too,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah. it's, I mean, I was listening to Elizabeth Gilbert this morning, being
Oh,
interviewed. I listened to every single interview of hers
I
whenever she
love
got one.
her. Love
Love
her.
her. Yeah, and she was just talking about Earth School, and Earth School is the hardest assignment that anyone will get, and the only way to make it through is like to. I think at the moment she was talking about just like almost gallows humor and like laughing at some of the just how crappy it can be. Like it can just be so hard, and I think you just you have to maintain this sense of lightness when you can, and
Mhm.
you grieve when you can, and you just let the wave hit you, um, and it passes. It passes too, and I think that's what you have to remember too. Like
And
nothing lasts forever. The beautiful things and the suffering, like it's all passing.
and none of us are going through it alone because I think it's part of the fabric of the human experience. And I take comfort in that too, knowing like I'm not the only person on earth going through whatever it is that I'm going through or having gone through whatever it is, that I went through. There's a great comfort in like hearing your story and seeing the humanness of it and my humanness connecting with that.
Yeah, I think a thought that comforts me too, that I've thought so much over these past 2 years, is just like um, I'm not Job, biblically, like
Yeah.
for people who aren't that familiar with the Bible, Job is
Yes.
he just got hit with like every type
Everything.
of suffering. Like
Yeah.
all of his kids died, his wives died, like his crops were blighted, just
Mhm.
everything. It's like that's not me. Like yeah, there is suffering, but it's not all one thing or the other. It's this mixture of darkness and light, and there's so much light. I mean,
Mm.
I just have so many gifts and so much privilege, and I just need to remember that and use that to be there for others too.
Well, I see you doing that and using that every single time that I click on your Instagram stories or see your posts. So I think you're doing a pretty dang good job, my friend.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Yeah. Okay. I want to talk about some happy stuff now because we touched on some pretty deep stuff. But even though, like, I know you've gone through so much tragedy, you always show up just so, again, so gracefully and so joyfully, which again is extra inspiring because I know your story. So, you're the co-owner and the co-creator of Tiny and Snail. And I love what you guys are doing. And I want to talk about creativity specifically. What sparks your creativity?
I almost feel like it's like downloads.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that? If
Yeah.
you're
That's
done
oh,
yeah.
totally. It usually comes to me like in the shower or in the middle of the night or while I'm doing something mindlessly.
Yeah, it'll just it'll come as downloads, it'll come as whims, and I think probably like 5 years ago, I just decided that if it was at all in my power, I would try to follow my creative whims and not like shut those down or leave them for another day, because I almost feel like it's like honoring the idea that has come to
Mm.
you, or honoring that like urge. And if I don't, it'll go. It'll like leave like the wind.
Did you read Big Magic by Elizabeth
Yeah,
Gilbert?
yeah. I mean, that's totally like helped give language to this, and probably honestly formed so much of my thinking around it.
Oh,
Uh,
me too, for sure. I love when she talks about the poet who said she would feel like a tiger tail brushing past her and she would grab for the tail, and then her poems would sometimes come out backwards. She'd start with the last word and go all the way to the first word.
yeah, that's so wild. I've never experienced that. I can't remember if it was in Big Magic or a different book, but it was another author who said that they would like sit out at the edge of the prairie, and then they would just feel this like rushing wind, and they would just feel the poem coming through them.
Yeah, Big
And then
Magic.
okay. Yes.
Yes, and you have to
It's like
run, like she would run back to her house.
to go capture it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely can. relate to that. But yeah, so it's like I just feel like I'll get these little sparks. Um, oh, like I'm super inspired right now to paint faux plants.
Ooh.
Yeah, because we are gearing up to eventually, when there's no longer a pandemic, to have an Airbnb, my husband and I, and I love plants and nature and gardening. Our dad is a huge gardener, and so he's like passed that love of plants and beauty to us. So anyway, that's like a big part of decor for me, but I also realize that like if the lighting isn't great, or if somebody's staying there for a couple of weeks and you don't want to like disturb them by watering the plants, it's not great. So anyway, I've been thinking how we can try to get some plants in there, and I want to paint like faux plants for the place. So it's almost like sculptural pieces.
Well, I loved the Instagram series that you did about creating fake leaves for your fiddle leaf fig tree. And I have unfortunately killed, I think, 2 fiddle leaf fig trees. So
they're easy to kill.
Oh my gosh, and I feel so bad, like I'm murdering something, but they are so hard to keep alive.
Putnam is like the biggest diva plant I've ever met.
Right?
I have never loved a plant so much, and I've never been so greatly
devastated. I know. It sounds so dramatic, but the first one that I killed, and then I did rehab 2 others, and I've had one now for an entire year. I'm so proud of myself.
Wow, that's amazing. You should like put that on a resume.
Right? They are so hard to keep alive. Okay, can you tell us a little bit about Tiny and Snail too? Because I feel like anybody who's listening, I know from the last episode that I did with Leah, there were people that went to your site and bought your cards. So can you just drop a little promo about Tiny and Snail? Because it's not like a normal stationery company.
No, so we are just obsessed with creating keepsake level cards that just are pure magic and delight for people. We just pour hours into making sure that each one is truly something that like somebody would open from an envelope and just like let out a little gasp, or be like, I am keeping this forever.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Because I think no matter, anytime that somebody sends a card, it's a beautiful gesture. Like I will never poo-poo that.
Yeah.
But I think we've all gotten cards where it's like, oh, that was really nice. And then like, you put in the recycling or something,
Yes.
And that's just not our aim. We're like, no, we are creating something that is going to just make the person feel so loved and cherished, because the art on the card is
it's so unique.
Yeah. Like
so unique.
Heartfelt, the messages we really think about a lot. We've gotten permission from some incredible people to put their quotes on some of the cards, and that's been really special. And it just like the paper, we care about everything.
Every detail. Yeah. Well, and
like paper quality is really beautiful.
I noticed on your website too that now you guys are doing envelope tutorials, because you create the most beautiful, the envelope that you sent me, I still have it upstairs. I'm like, I'm going to be keeping this forever, because it's a work of art in and of itself. And when you open up your mailbox and you see like a painting in your freaking mailbox, there's no way that that's not going to brighten your day.
Thank you. It's such a fun outlet for me. I feel like the cool part about creating envelopes is you can't go wrong with it. I think that's what a lot of people get like too roundly tight about with art. It's like, oh, I'm not creative, or when I was 15, somebody made fun of this, and I just don't do creative things. And it's just like, I don't think that's true. Like, go find a magazine in your pile, next to your bed, and find a cool image, and I will show you how to fold it into an envelope that somebody will like squeal over.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. So if y'all haven't seen these envelope tutorials, you need to check them out, and the whole stationery company. What is your website for Tiny and Snail?
Pretty easy. It's tinyandsnail.com.
Yeah. And they're on Instagram, and their Instagram handle is
Tiny_and_snail
yes. And
at Tiny and Snail. And we just love to share our art, our cards. I think that's something too that we're just really dedicated to is being like a real brand.
oh,
We're
and
like
you are.
real
You guys are
people.
so honest and fun, but you talk about a lot of really deep things too.
Yeah, and that's important to me. I love like connecting with
Yeah.
people over on Instagram, and the messages that we'll get from people are just so beautiful and moving. And there's I think a guiding philosophy in my life for the last like 10 years has just been coming back to this question of who do I love and what am I doing about it? And that can
Mhm.
guide so many decisions. And I think, when Leah was in her accident, when dad got diagnosed, like one huge comfort was just they know how I feel about them. Like there is no
Oh.
doubt, like exactly how much I adore them. And I think that is a huge comfort. None of us know what's going to happen in the future, but we
Mhm.
can know like what we're doing for our people and how we're showing up for them. And
Oh, I gotta write that down. Who do I love and what am I doing about it?
yep. And so in some small way, I think that's what we try to facilitate with Tiny and Snail. It's like let people know what they mean to, like write them a card. I do not care what your handwriting looks like. Like so many people are like, I don't like my handwriting. And it's just like, nobody
We're
cares.
way too hard on ourselves. No, nobody does care. And we need to just be telling each other all the time how cool we think
Yeah.
each person is, you know? It's true though. It's true. I think people become so self-conscious and they get so wrapped up in how they're presenting versus like how they actually feel inside. And sharing that. Oh,
Yeah.
I love that so much. Okay, I have a few more questions for you. You game?
Yeah.
Okay. If you could tell your younger self anything, what would it be?
It's going to be okay. I,
Mm,
I have always just been relatively tightly wound, I'd say.
mm.
And
I
like,
relate.
yeah, okay. Yeah, type A, fellow people over here. Like catastrophic thinking has been something I've really had to work on, and I still struggle with it. Like worry can be just a constant companion for me,
Mm,
and so it's not something that I'm like cured of by any means, but I think I've worked really hard to like rein in my brain
mhm.
and try to stop myself from going 10, 15, 20 steps down the road and just, okay, what is today bringing? What can I do today? And that's what we're going to focus on. Um, so I think, yeah, just telling myself like, it's going to be okay. Um,
Yeah.
and it is. We actually have a tiny card for Tiny and Snail. It's just like very mini.
So cute.
And we created it out of the whole experience of Leah's accident, and it's in typewriter, and it says tiny news flash, everything's going to be okay.
Mm.
And I had posted that on Instagram a couple months ago, and somebody commented and they were just like, yeah, but what if it's not? Like, what if it's not for some people? And I definitely sympathize with that question. And I've, I've thought the same thing.
Mm.
Um, and I had to sit with that for a while to know like how to respond to that. But I was just like, I see where you're coming from with that question. And yeah, like life is so hard for some people. And I do not have the answers of why it hits different people the way it does. But we truly believe that, like, on a cosmic scale,
Mhm.
it's going to be okay.
Mhm.
And it might not be okay today or tomorrow or like even decade from now, I think there will be spots of okayness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are spots of brightness, and like it's our job to look for them. And but it's going to be okay.
I completely agree with you there with everything that you just said. Okay. Who inspires you?
In my inner circle, Leah, for sure.
Yeah.
She's such a badass. She's so incredible. My dad, it's just like watching how the two of them have walked through suffering and just had such an acceptance, such humor, such grit about it. It's really incredible. Watching my mom, her life has just been upended for 2 years, and she still has this lightness about her. She takes 1 million photos a day of beautiful things. She's on her walk.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
She still just like thinks my siblings and I are just so hilarious whenever we get together. She just cracks up. Like, my husband, he's, so good, just salt of the earth, like hardworking, generous, supportive of me. And so I'm just really inspired by, the people.
You've chosen well, sister, in all the areas.
Yeah, man. Life lottery right there with all those people of mine, and all my other siblings too. If they listen to this podcast, I don't want them to feel left out.
Oh, of course, yes. So,
but then, like, on a more famous level, I think I'm wildly inspired by Elizabeth Gilbert, as we talked about. Glennon Doyle is a huge.
Oh yes, Untamed. Mm-hmm.
I still have yet to read that, but it's like totally on my list, and I've read everything else that she's written, and I just listened to all of her interviews. Rob Bell is also.
Oh, I love Rob Bell. Yeah. I read one of his books within the last couple of years that was so profound. The cover is all black and it's red letters on the front.
Love Wins.
Yes. What's it called again?
Love Wins.
Love Wins. I love that book. It's so good.
That's beautiful. He also most recently wrote a book about the Bible, and it is amazing.
Really? I need to pick that up. Because I was raised in such a conservative Christian home, and then my family completely fell apart. And interestingly, my faith was not shaken. It was like the aftermath of so many kind of tragic things happening within the church, and a lot of those kinds of things that just made me go, this does not seem like Jesus to me. Mm-hmm. And I can't have that misalignment in my soul. So I need to find a better way here. And so Rob Bell is somebody that I really respect for taking this like ancient gospel and kind of bringing it into what I feel like is more aligned with what Jesus taught versus the institutionalized religious machine that is happening right now.
Oh, 100%. Just everything, like, it just resonates so deeply with me. And I was raised in a pretty conservative school, Catholic school too. Mm-hmm. And then I went to a Jesuit college, and that really broadened kind of my view of spirituality and Catholicism. And I've just continued to like broaden and broaden. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Rob Bell is just beautiful. Like, one of the highlights of my life is actually he left a voicemail on my phone because I sent him an email asking if we could use one of his quotes on a card.
Oh,
and I have a Rob Bell voicemail, and it's just like, I can die a happy woman.
That is so cool. And I think what you touched on there too, besides the cool factor of having Rob Bell leave you a voicemail, is you keep expanding. And I think that for me is what faith is this continuous expansion of love, like over and over and over and over again. And for me, it transcends labels. which I believe Jesus transcended labels too. But that is something that I take great comfort in, is just, I can always keep expanding. I don't have to constrict if it doesn't feel like that's the truth for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, you'll love his book.
Oh, I'll get it. I'll get it. And what's the new one called?
Oh, it's the longest title ever.
I'll find it and
If you just
link it in the
Google
show
like
notes.
Rob Bell Bible, yeah, I think it became a bestseller. He's like, who would have
I'm
thought
sure
in
it did.
2019 that a book about the Bible would? But yeah, it's beautiful. It's so amazing, and just the story. It's amazing takeaway I got is just like the stories that we tell ourselves are so important, and these are, if you look at these stories through certain lenses, like they can be expansive and widening and just, yeah, like grow your circle of who you love, and that is the core of Jesus. Like,
and I
think it's so easy to get away from that.
Oh, well, and I think in conservative religious circles, like traditional conservative religious circles, it's all about constricting and keeping it tight and not letting any kind of outside thought in, because, it's kind of already figured out and measured out. And I think the new wave of Christianity and faith is the more Rob Bell approach, which is like expansion, expansion, expansion. And Jesus was such a maverick. To think that if we were to translate Jesus into modern day, he would still be saying no to all of these groups of people or these ways of life, I just think is not staying true to the gospel message that Jesus shared with us in the beginning. So,
yeah.
Okay, I'll definitely share that book in the show notes, and I'm going to buy it. Next question. Is there a mantra or something that inspires you to hold on during really tough times?
I think one that I came up with during therapy a few years ago was, I am infinitely cared for. And
oh my gosh, yes.
That's a touchstone that I go back to, and that helps me from cycling. That was a time when I was really spinning out with that catastrophic thinking, and it's just like, okay, but come back here. Like, I am infinitely cared for. Like, I am just cupped in the palm of this great love, and it's not going anywhere. So that's really helpful. I mean, I'm just a huge collector of quotes, and I think Leah touched on that.
Yes, and I do the same thing. If I find a quote, I write it down. I put it in my phone. I have a mirror on the opposite wall of here, or in my little office, and I wrote in lipstick on the mirror a quote, and it's "Destruction before creation," which is a Danielle Laporte quote. So I completely relate to that. Words are just, that's kind of my thing.
Me too. And I think when you soak them in enough, they come to you at the right times. Like the
yes.
song came to me at the right time with Leah. And I know that Leah had shared this quote during her podcast, but I think of it all the time. The Frederick Buechner quote, here is the world, beautiful and terrible things will happen. Do not be afraid. And so it's just these different quotes that it's like, they're there for you when you need them. I find it in song lyrics. A couple Michael W. Smith songs came in.
Yeah.
Like, I grew up with him,
Of course, me too. Yeah.
And during Leah's accident, like, he has two newish. I don't know if you've heard. One is called Surrounded, and another one is called Million Lights, or A Million Lights. And those both became like total prayers for me during Leah's whole battle. We would dance to those, like before surgeries, we would put on Surrounded. And one of the key phrases is just like, it might look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. And so we would just, dance to that. And so I think kind of like we were saying earlier, it's like, what do you choose to put into this precious brain of yours and this precious heart of
Yes.
yours, and like guard it. Don't just let anything in there, because it will shape your life. And I'm so passionate about that. Like, you have, well, you don't have to choose. Some
But
people
it's
don't.
wise too. Yeah. But it
But like,
is. It's
you
important.
have to choose what you're consuming, and it will shape your life. So choose the good things, like choose the
Mhm.
joyful things, choose the hopeful things, um, and like just steady your gaze on hope.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Oh, amen. Amen and amen to that. Can you share with me or with all of us a book that you love that you feel like helped you become who you are?
So in like eighth grade, I read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens, probably like four
Yes.
times.
Stephen Covey. Yes. I feel like we really
Yeah,
would
and
have been friends.
yeah. I wish you would have been in my high school.
Me
Um,
too.
I did, like, I was never like bullied or anything. You know, I was just a pretty confident kid, so I don't think I thought anything of it. But I think my fellow classmates were just like, "Wow, like super into self-help book." So I think that was very formative to me as I was like a teenager. And then a book that is just so stunningly beautiful is Chasing Daylight. What's the I wrote it down. Chasing Daylight: How My Forthcoming Death Transformed My Life, by Eugene O'Kelly.
Writing it down now.
It
Chasing Daylight, Eugene O'Kelly?
hmm
Okay.
Yeah, that one stuck with me for years and years and years. It's just, in a nutshell, like, he was an accountant, just super right brained, had everything planned to a T, and then got this massive illness. I think cancer. It's been like so long since I've read it. But yeah, got diagnosed with this fatal cancer. And then, but he was like, but I was going to approach my death just like I'd approached my life. And it was like coming up with a plan that made sense. And he just said, when you're given a finite amount of time like that, it really sharpens the lens. And I wanted
Mm.
to have beautiful ending moments with everyone in my life who was important to me. And he went through and like actively planned these out. And so he, like, as an accountant would, he listed out all the people, and then he kind of put them into rings. And so, you know, very, very outer people, he's like, that moment might have been just a quick note or a letter. And then as the rings got closer and closer, the moments became more intimate and more deep. But, and yeah, he just approached it. He's like, I don't want this to extend and drag on, and like we're checking in with each other. He's like, I know I'm gonna die, but I want this like beautiful, impactful moment for both of us. And so he did that with everyone in his life, and it's just
Yeah, that's so profound and so courageous.
it's a beautiful book, and I think it's had a big impact on me.
It hit all the heartstrings.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
and it
and
was
then
probably a pretty incredible book for you to read prior to all of the things that you've experienced with your family too.
yeah, I think it's kind of it circles back to that, like, who do you love, what are you doing about it. um
Mm.
we just get a chance to tell people what they mean now, and
Mhm.
you got to take it. You just
Yeah.
have to do it.
Yeah.
um yeah, another hugely impactful book is Anne Lamott, Help, Thanks, Wow, the three
Yes, yes.
I I read that book back to back, like like there was no space in between. I read it once and I was like, I'm ripping through it again. And I think of that a lot too. It's like that's what my prayers boil down to. It's just like
Mhm.
help, for thanks,
Mhm.
for wow, for all three of them.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I love that. Okay. What do you want people to know beyond a shadow of a doubt?
Um, Pouring love into your people is never wasted.
Mm,
Never wasted. And the other thing is that hope and angst sometimes live in the same room, but
yeah.
you're
Oh.
going to want to give hope the queen size bed.
Oh, I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Okay. And where can people find you online?
So the primary place I hang out is Tiny and Snail on our Instagram. So on Instagram, tiny underscore and underscore snail. We pop in there pretty much every day, and we're always posting. And then my personal Instagram, I hang out a lot on there too, and that's at your biggest fan, Grace.
And I'll link all of those in the
And
show
our
notes.
website for Tiny and Snail, as we had said earlier, is tinysnail.com.
Perfect. Perfect. Grace, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It was a really beautiful time to reflect, and yeah, thank you. Just
Oh, what a gift you are to all the people that you have in your circle and outside of it. You really are just such a light.
well, I just appreciate you, and yeah, your vulnerability and your openness, and just striving for growth. It's really beautiful to see. And
Thank you.
so anyway, I'm cheering you on from afar, and hopefully one of these days, hopefully you can stay in my Airbnb someday with all
Yes. Oh, I would
the
love that. I would love that. I would love it. Oh, I would love it so much. Okay. Well, I'm going to end recording and yeah, again, just thank you for being here.